Liz Joyner. I'm the CEO of the Village Square, and on behalf of the Village Square and our partners, Leon County Government, who have made all of this tonight possible, welcome. We're glad to have you. We are delighted this evening to have some county elected leadership in the audience. Commissioner Brian Deloge, where are you? Give a yell. Commissioner Rick Miner. All right. Did I miss anyone? So this is an event that we call the Club of Honest Citizen. It's an event that we've done with Leon County Government since 2014. And the Club of Honest Citizens has a little bit of history. In pre-revolutionary London, I promise this won't go on too long, Benjamin Franklin brought friends together who had lots of different expertise, and they talked about all sorts of issues. They talked about sort of civilized life together. One of his groups was called a junta, and one of them was called the Club of Honest Whigs. Those groups together were credited with doing things like creating the concept of paved roads, volunteer fire departments, public hospitals, public libraries, so they did some pretty crazy good work. They also were credited with the concept, if you've seen the book, the invention of air. They actually sort of together learned about oxygen and what it was. So it's just sort of the story of people putting their heads together and coming up with great ideas, which is very much what we're doing here tonight. Dr. Eric Klinenberg, author of the book, Palaces for the People, How Social Infrastructure Can Help Fight Inequality, Polarization, and the Decline of Civic Life. Dr. Klinenberg is a professor of sociology and director of the Institute for Public Knowledge at NYU. He also serves as research director of Rebuild by Design, which began as a federal competition to generate infrastructure plans for the region affected by Hurricane Sandy, and now helps cities around the world transform and address climate change. Dr. Klinenberg has published in the American Sociological Review, Theory and Society, the American Journal of Public Health. In addition to his scholarship, he has contributed to the New Yorker, the New York Times Magazine, Rolling Stone, London Review of Books, Wired, This American Life, and other publications. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Eric Klinenberg.
Okay, thank you. That's all I've got for you tonight. I've waited my whole life to be intro to that song, and when I came on here and I saw the stage, like, you guys have to understand, I'm just a sociology professor. I was like, I'm going to take advantage of this moment 100%. So thank you, Maestro. That was great. They gave me the option of like singing this or just speaking extemporaneously, so I'm going to go with the speaking thing. If that's okay with you. And I'm going to do one other thing, which I did this morning. I got to meet with the Leon County commissioners, and I tried this. I'm going to try it again with you tonight. I hope this isn't going to be off-putting for you, but what I want to do is like not use any technology at all and just have a conversation with you. Is that okay? It's going to be very weird. I feel like I found my soulmate behind me. Wherever you are, sir, my hat is off. Now I feel like I wrote a book with a stand-up comedian, and now I'm just gonna channel him for the rest of the time. It's gonna be a very different night than it would have been otherwise had it not been for Eye of the Tiger. So yeah, do you guys have the Amazon 4-star store here yet? Has that started in Tallahassee? Do you guys know about the Amazon 4-star store?
No.
No. Right, Amazon has this amazing thing called the 4-star store, and the deal with it is that it only stocks products that have gotten 4 stars or higher by Amazon reviewers. So like, there are very few books, actually, but there's a lot of other very fun things that you can do. And any of you guys have kids? Any people here with children? So a lot of children people here. I have kids. I have a now 10-year-old daughter and a 12-year-old son. And earlier this fall, my book had just come out, and you can't really tell because it's like buried up at the very top. But the book is called Palaces for the People, which is what Andrew Carnegie called libraries. That was his phrase for libraries. Carnegie was a Scottish immigrant to the U.S. And are there any children here? I saw some little people here before. Okay, never mind. Okay, there's a little.
Little enough that.
Okay. Andrew Carnegie was kind of and he was a very difficult guy. He was like the wealthiest person. I'm very sorry about that. They won't even notice. He was a very difficult guy. He was kind of the Bill Gates of his time, and he was just like one of the the wealthiest man in the world at his time, and he was horrible to laborers. He like very famously hired Pinkertons, and during labor disputes, just like viciously beat up his workers. But he had some virtues too. He gave away the equivalent of $250 billion in today's money to charitable things, including he helped to build 2,800 libraries around the world, including 1,700 in the United States. And there's a lot of places, you've probably been in some of them, that have these Carnegie libraries. And so yeah, you have one here. Have you guys been to the Carnegie Library? Is it like a big grand building? And no.
Small grand building.
Yeah. The big northern industrials try to cheap out when they come south because they figure their friends aren't going to know. But the Carnegie Libraries are often like these big, high ceilings and big windows. And the idea was that the library would exalt people who were working in factories and living in tenements, and it would be a place where you could go and be a better version of yourself. You could make something more of yourself. And so Carnegie was an immigrant, and he really believed that everyone should have the chance to improve, and the library would be really crucial for that vision. So, I forgive him some of his sins, not so much, but I say some nice things about him. Anyway, so I wrote this book. It's called Palaces for the People. We're not selling it here tonight because we didn't coordinate it, but they told me that we're going to do one thing. We're going to do a really fun thing at the end of the talk. If we're having fun, we're all going to order it at the same time on our smartphones. I'll coordinate that with you guys later. So, no technology. We make some exceptions for things that will make money for me. So this book is about libraries, and so I didn't lose the thread. The Amazon 4-star store opened, and there was an article in the New York Times about it because they opened up an Amazon 4-star store very close to my neighborhood. And I thought, and here's the parents thing, guys. It was a Sunday morning. It was very early, and my wife was busy, and I had my daughter, and there was a lot of hours between me and the time when my wife was going to get home, and I was scrambling to come up with something to do. So I came up with this brilliant idea because I'm a sociologist, and the idea was, check this out. You guys are going to like this. We're going to go first to the Amazon 4-star store, and we're going to have an experience there. And then I was going to take her to the Carnegie Library, not too far from us, and we're going to compare the experiences together. Does that sound great? That's what happens when your dad is a sociologist. So we came up with this plan. So we go to the Amazon 4-star store, and guys, it's awesome. The Amazon 4-star store. There's so much fun in there. They have that vacuum cleaner that goes all over the house and you don't have to push it. What's the Zumba? Is that what it's called? What's it called? Roomba. Zumba's like the dance thing, right? So they have the Roomba. They have all kinds of fun games and electronics. They have a talking Chewbacca, and it was amazing. It talks to you, it makes Chewbacca sounds, and my daughter loved it. And we were there for 20 minutes or so, and in the 20 minutes we were there, I think my daughter asked for about $1,400 worth of stuff. And because that's kind of what it's there for, right? That's what Amazon is there for, is to make you want stuff. And so this was part of the plan, because I knew that she was going to want a lot of the things that they had there. And I also knew that I wasn't going to get anything for her that day. And so not because I don't love her or anything, just I don't have, I'm a sociology professor, remember that. And you guys didn't even buy my book. So the plan was we were gonna do this, and she was gonna get I want this, it's really fun. And then it was going to be like, oh, well, you can't have, I'm sorry, maybe you can have that. Your birthday's coming up, it's Hanukkah, Christmas, she gets to do Hanukkah and Christmas because I married a Christian woman. So like, she's got plenty of opportunities to get good stuff later, but that was very frustrating to her because she was 9 years old at the time. And so, have you guys had this experience? Like, you go into a place and it feels really great, and they want to sell you stuff, and you're like, oh, I want that, I want that, I want that. And then at some point there's a reckoning, and you realize you're actually not going to get any of that stuff, and it feels really empty. And that's kind of the sad part about like commercial. I mean, it's almost Christmas, right? So we're all experiencing that right now. It's like, it's kind of amazing. We have all these great things here, and also it's kind of hollow and empty and makes you feel sad, right? She's laughing at my existential crisis I'm having here, but that's okay. It's kind of, that's what it's like out there, right? So I've got it totally set up, right? So we go to the Amazon 4-star store. She wants all these things, and then here's the plan. We're going to go to the library, and guess what's going to happen to every time she asks me for something at the library. You guys know what I'm going to say? Yes. Anything you want. You can have anything. Yes. Have you guys been to the library? Anyone have this experience as a kid? You go to the library, you can have anything, you can have as many things, books, DVDs, I don't care. Have anything you want. You got your own library card, right? Yes. We get to the library, and it's closed. So now I've got this problem on my hands because like my whole plan, this comparative research design, has failed. And I have to figure out what to do. And so basically I'm like, okay, well, Lila, like, why do you think it's closed? And she says, like, it's closed because you should have known it was closed, Dad, and that was true. Because I just spent like a year going to libraries every day, but I wasn't thinking. And why was it closed? It's Sunday, Dad. Nothing's open on Sunday. Like the government things aren't open on Sunday. Libraries are never open on Sunday. And I was like, huh, that's interesting. And then I remembered something from all this work I'd done doing research on libraries, which is that not long ago, Sundays were the busiest, most popular days of the week in the library system. Why is that? Because Sundays, like, yeah, some of you guys go to church, but I'm looking around here, I know a lot of you guys aren't going to church on Sunday, or you go for a little bit in the morning and then you don't stay all afternoon, right? And so on Sunday, you have, like I did that morning, a lot of time where it's like just you and the kids, or just you, and you've got to figure out what to do. And so like, Sundays were great days, and libraries used to be booming on Sunday afternoons. Like that's exactly when you want to have your library open. Are your libraries open here on Sunday? Yep. Yes. Nice work, Leon County. Give it up for Leon County. It's kind of amazing. Commissioner, I salute you. But they were not open. I mean, there are very few libraries in New York City are open on Sundays. The branch libraries, we have several hundred of them. Not only are they not open on Sundays, like they close often at like 6 p.m., sometimes 8 p.m. So like if you have a kind of a regular mainstream job, you don't really get to go with your kids during the week, and you can't really go on Sunday, right, because they're closed, as my daughter and I learned. And so then the question was like, well, why aren't the libraries open on Sunday anymore if they used to be the most popular day? Why aren't the libraries open on Sundays anymore? It's not because we became more Christian, because we don't fund the libraries well, right? Most places are not funded. We pulled away our funding from libraries. We pulled away our support from libraries. And so it feels like a natural thing. Like my daughter will grow up with the sense like, oh, it's natural that like we just don't have enough money to keep the library open. And the parks are closed. There are a lot of things that are closed exactly when you would think you would use them. Have you ever thought about that? Have you ever noticed that? All these things are like, oh, these would be great things for us. Palaces. Yeah? A few years ago, I was working with the federal government, this project that you heard about for a second on this project called Rebuild by Design. And Rebuild by Design was a competition that came from President Obama after Superstorm Sandy hit New York. And the amazing thing about this event is that Sandy It was a massive storm. It was like 1,000 miles wide, and 20 states were affected by it. Millions of people lost their power, but there are a few states in the Northeast, New York and Pennsylvania and New Jersey and Connecticut, that were most affected. I mean, really like devastated. More than $60 billion in economic damage, lots of lost lives, serious health problems. We haven't even kind of come to terms with the health issues there, because you guys understand this since you live in a place where the 1 in 100-year storm happens like every few months. When you have like a catastrophic problem with the system and the power goes out and places get flooded and destroyed, if you have a chronic health problem, like you're on dialysis or you're getting treated for cancer, you know, your care gets disrupted, and oftentimes it's very hard to find a replacement. And so even if you don't die like right away in a disaster, you really suffer. And so it's like, have you been following this thing about Puerto Rico, like how many people died in Maria? You know, and they're like, there's 12 people who died in Maria. It's more like 5,000 people died in Maria, and countless others have been really sick. And so this was a huge storm, and as it happened, like I had just become the director of this institute at NYU, and announced that we were going to work on cities and climate change right before Sandy hit. So like the day that the power went back on, we got out there and started doing all these events, and I was writing stuff, and I got this call from the Obama administration asking me if I would be interested in being the research director for this this system air conditioning. I thought I have so much respect for this sound guy now. I was like, ooh, he's doing like a sound effect for a storm coming. It's gonna get louder and louder. Someone's gonna throw a bucket of water on me. But I'm gonna wait and see what you guys have in store for me back there. You're doing such nice work. So what they were able to do is, you know, Congress, after a big fight, passed a $50 billion disaster appropriation bill. It was a big relief bill to kind of try to bail out the region. And I don't know if do you guys follow these debates where it's like, it's so weird, like just an example of how polarized we've become, like whether you're going to vote to provide relief for people who are devastated by a disaster kind of depends on whether it's a blue state or a red state. So you've got all these people who are in red states that get hammered all the time, and when New York City gets battered, they're like, nope, sorry, I don't think it's real hardship up there. You know, I think we're all overusing this disaster relief stuff. It's time to get serious about this. And then, of course, like 3 months later, they get hit, and it's, you know, the same thing happens all over again. So we went into one of those cycles, but we got the $50 million, and then President Obama had this idea, which was that he was going to carve out a space to do what he called the Rebuild by Design competition. He was going to do an international competition and invite teams of engineers and architects and city planners from around the world to join together and to compete for a couple $2 billion in public money to try to come up with innovative infrastructure projects for places that were hit by Sandy that need to adjust and adapt for the threats that are coming, including climate change. Are you allowed to say climate change in Tallahassee now? I know for years I wasn't allowed, you weren't allowed to do that. See, it's okay?
December 31st after that.
After December 31st, okay, don't tell anyone I said climate change. I would like to be allowed to fly home tomorrow and let out of the state. So, it's a very lovely state, but it's way too cold here now. So this is really an exciting thing, and they got 150 teams that applied to be part of this competition, and ultimately the federal government picked 10 finalists, and these are big teams, amazing engineers, amazing architects, like household names, and they asked me to be the research director. And my job as the research director was to help these groups, many of which didn't know all that much about the region, come to understand the needs and vulnerabilities and possibilities in different places, because they didn't design things before the competition started. They didn't get into the competition with a design proposal. They came in with like a concept and a mission statement and an orientation. And so I had to kind of help them zero in on what they wanted to do. So I had done research in the past on another disaster, a heat wave that hit my hometown in Chicago in 1995. I got some sociologists here that were smiling and laughing because all sociologists know about the heat wave now, but it's really only us who know about the heat wave in 1995. Do you guys know about the heat wave in 1995 in Chicago? This guy, 700 people died from a heat wave that lasted a couple days in Chicago. It's crazy, right? You should have like Wikipedia when we let everyone get the cell phones back. So So what I learned in Chicago when I did research there is that the power went out in Chicago, the communication system went down, trains weren't working very well. But if you looked at like a map of the places that died, it wasn't like there was a strong correlation between which neighborhoods lost power and which neighborhoods had a lot of deaths. The places that had a lot of deaths were like, they were very poor, they were very segregated, they were the places that always suffer. But even more than that, what I learned when I looked even more closely is that there were a bunch of places that were poor and segregated that did actually really well. And then there were a bunch that did not very well at all. And the reason the ones that did not very well at all, if they were poor and segregated, is because they had what I came to think of as a depleted social infrastructure. They had empty lots, they had a lot of abandoned buildings, they had very little commercial activity, they had broken sidewalks, they had dilapidated parks, they didn't really have like a strong set of nonprofit organizations, commercial outlets, and so if you lived in a neighborhood like that, you were just much more likely to kind of like hunker down at home, especially if you're older and frail. And in the heat, like that could protect you from a lot of things. But if the heat waves come in and you need to get yourself cooled down, and you don't have air conditioning because there's no power or because you're poor, that's a formula for disaster right there, right? But then it turns out there are a bunch of other neighborhoods that were segregated and poor, yes, but their social infrastructure was very much intact. You know, the sidewalks were active and lively. They had like strong community organizations. They had good branch libraries, religious organizations, parks that worked well. And if you live in a place like that, even if you suffer from a lot of things, you get the protective benefits of having people around you who look after you, who know who you are, to know to knock on your door when something goes wrong. And so not only did people who live in those neighborhoods survive the heat wave, they actually have life expectancy that's 5 years longer than the people who are poor and segregated and live in depleted neighborhoods. Think about that. Like if I divided this room in two, everybody's similar except for this place has got like really lively social infrastructure. Look how many people are sitting over there. You see that, you guys? I don't know what's wrong with you guys over there. You sat on the wrong side of the room. Nobody wants to sit with you. Everybody's getting out of here. And it's all depleted there and you're probably lonely. And no one's looking after you. And so what happens over there is that you have much higher risk of not only dying in the heat wave, but the life expectancy is 5 years shorter. That's actually an amazing thing. So I had done this before. Yeah, you two over there, you should be looking after each other much better. So when they asked me to do this thing, I was like, yes, I want to be the research director and I want to work with you. But I want to reorient this project a little bit because instead of only looking at the conventional hard infrastructures, I want all the teams who are working on this project to think about social infrastructure too. I'm like, oh, what's social infrastructure? You've never heard of that. Fair point. So, social infrastructure. Here's what social infrastructure is. The physical places and the organizations that shape our interactions. And it's my working definition here. The physical places and organizations that shape our interactions. So she's writing it down here. You should get that down too. You're studying sociology. And when they're robust, when they're working well, when we invest in it, in social infrastructure, we're much more likely to connect with one another, to have positive interactions with friends, with neighbors, to look after each other. Social infrastructure does that for us. If we don't invest in social infrastructure, it's like the equivalent of the power going out. We're more likely to kind of hunker down and have things not work. We're on our own. That was the lesson from Chicago, and I wanted us to think about that in New York. So I told this story this morning to the commissioners, like when Sandy first hit New York City, and everybody got really worried about how we're going to protect a place like Manhattan from rising seas and stronger storms. The like forward-thinking engineers, you know, the people who believed in science, who were legally allowed to use the phrase climate change. The proposal that they made for how to protect Manhattan was this phrase. How many of you guys have heard this phrase before? Build a... You don't even want to say it. I can tell you don't want to say it. Build a wall. That's literally what people were saying. Like, climate change is coming. You've got to protect New York City. Let's build a wall. And I could show you like the plans for a giant seawall that was going to be right by the Verrazano Bridge. And the idea was it was going to protect Manhattan because there's so many people and so much valuable infrastructure, right? But it's very inconvenient because it turns out that right next to Manhattan, there's this whole other state called New Jersey. And a lot of my friends are in denial about it, but I've been there. I can tell you it really does exist. And if you build a seawall, the water and the sediment smashes into it, and then it actually goes over to New Jersey and makes them very unhappy. And so it's very expensive to build a wall. And also, like, if you build a seawall to protect you from the water, those ocean views suddenly become less nice, right? I mean, now you're looking at a giant wall. It feels like you're living behind a wall, which isn't very nice, right? And you're also, like, if you build a wall, the idea is we're going to have that wall there, and it's going to block out the storm surge when it comes in. That can work if the gate is open most of the time, but if you live in a world where the seas are rising and you have to close the gate more and more, then there's this enormous ecosystem behind the wall. It's the Hudson River, for instance, and all the land that's connected to the Hudson River. All that stuff gets disrupted if you build a wall there, right? Like, if we start building walls, God knows what's going to happen to the ecosystems around it, right? And all the life that depends on that ecosystem. Let's say we throw in New Jersey, though. And we say, like, okay, we're going to build a wall. We'll put New Jersey in there. You know, they can be loud, you know, the guys from Jersey sometimes. So we'll include you guys, too. You're not going to believe it when I tell you this, but it turns out that the country continues even after New Jersey. There's a place called Delaware, right? I'm not lying to you. And then after Delaware, Maryland, Virginia. Okay, you raise your hand when you want to stop the wall. North Carolina, should you stop it in North Carolina? South Carolina, you want to stop the wall in South Carolina? Georgia, there's a little piece of Georgia, I've been there, right? And then there's some other giant state, and people there want to put walls up too sometimes, right? And so it turns out that, like, building a wall is not the best strategy for dealing with climate change. You know, you can't actually build a wall. So that was a loser of an idea. But at the same time, you can't dismiss it altogether, because there are some places that you do need to protect that are very valuable, like London, New Orleans, Venice. Those are all cities that don't exist without something like a wall. So I started working with these teams and said, like, all right, you guys have to do social infrastructure. And I want this incorporated into the final plan. And I want you not to think just in terms of, like, building giant structures that are going to keep water out, because you're probably not going to keep water out. So one of the really exciting plans that came out of this was a plan in Staten Island, which is the borough of New York City that had the most deaths during Sandy. It's totally exposed to the ocean. And there's a woman named Kate Moore from a design firm called Scape. Actually, Kate became the first landscape architect to ever win a MacArthur Genius Award. And she got it in part for this plan, which was what she called living breakwaters, and something like what we call natural infrastructure. It's not natural in the sense that it didn't just grow organically from nothing, but the idea is, instead of building a giant wall in Staten Island, she's going to put some stonework and oyster beds and mussel reefs, oyster reefs, mussel beds into the breakwaters, and put in a whole system that would attenuate the energy of the waves, not keep the water out, but make it less destructive when it comes in. But then also, social infrastructure, she wanted to build a whole cultural program along the shore that would include, like, educational hubs and social centers, gathering places where people could come together and confront the reality of their relationship to the water as it gets higher. So, you know, so many of us in modern societies, we kind of turn our back to the river or to the ocean, right? We act as if all that stuff that's been happening in nature is irrelevant to us because we've got it under control. But we can't do that anymore, right? Nature has bitten back. And so Kate and her team wanted to create social infrastructure along the coastline that was going to dramatically transform our relationship to the ecosystem that we depend on. It was a very powerful idea, and they got about $70 million of federal money to build this. So the really exciting design possibilities that come from reorienting our relationship to the water and to the land, and thinking about building in terms of social infrastructure too. And there was one day when I was showing this design team around a neighborhood in Brooklyn, and it's a revered design team that has done a lot of work on the coast of Louisiana after Katrina, and thought really seriously about how to build places that are community gathering places, like basically trying to do double duty with our investments. And I just went to the Cascades Park today here, so when I arranged to come down, commissioners told me I had to go see the Cascades facility, and it's actually it's exactly this idea, right? Like we have a water resource that's going to help a vulnerable place with water management, but instead of just making it a simple water management tool, we're also going to make it a park. So it's not like you just get a benefit on the one day, I don't know, every 10 years or 5 years or a couple weeks here in Tallahassee where there's a massive storm. You know, you also have a park that improves the quality of people's life and improves health every day, right? It makes this a better city to live in. And so this team was really good at that, and they came to me and they said, Eric, we listened to you talk about social infrastructure, we totally get this idea. We have a plan for a new building type that we're calling a resilience center. And we want to build a resilience center. We're going to start it with a prototype in this poor neighborhood in Connecticut, and then we want to kind of scale it up. And we're going to put one of these resilience centers. If it goes well, we want to have a resilience center like this, like in every neighborhood in the region that was affected by Sandy, and then we want to have a resilience center in every neighborhood in the country. So I was like, wow, you guys are thinking really big. That's very ambitious. Like, tell me about your resilience center. So they say, okay, here's the concept of a resilience center. We want to have a building that is like big, flexible space, you know, very, very welcoming building, aggressively welcoming. When you walk by the building, you're going to really know that you're wanted there. It's going to be, you know, publicly funded so that it's open like 6 or 7 days a week, and it's going to be staffed by people who are experts in making people in the community feel like they're at home there and they're wanted there. They're really going to be, because they're, you know, it's a resilience place, which means like they're there to help everybody bounce back. But the idea is that if you're going to have a place in your community that's there for during a crisis, you're only going to really trust it and want to use it if it's also there helping you every day, right? It's that relationship between the everyday and the crisis that's so important. So the way that we're going to get people in here every day is we're going to have a lot of programming. And we've listened to you talk about the heat wave, Eric, and we know that like very young people and very old people are most vulnerable. And as you know, I don't know if you agree with me, but I tend to think that like you judge the quality of a society and the kind of ethical principles of a society by how well a society takes care of the most vulnerable people. You know, very young people, little children. Never swear on them. And very old people, you know, frail people. Like how well do you protect them? That says a lot about what kind of society you live in, doesn't it? Right? And so we want to make sure that we do good things for them. So we're going to have all this programming. We're going to like make sure that we are a place where kids from a very early age come together and get to know each other in the neighborhood, because a lot of parents like just don't have a place where their kids can hang out together. And the caretakers need a place to get to know each other, and the resilience center is going to be a place where like families become friends and they provide, like, generates new support systems. And we also want to have a place for older people, right? So we're going to have programs for them. We're going to do a lot of things. So, you know, a lot of elderly people, they're looking for something that's more than a senior center, and they want to be with people from other generations. They want a more lively environment, and the Resilience Center is going to be that kind of place for them. And honestly, we want everybody in the neighborhood to come here. So what do people want these days? They want like computers and Wi-Fi access. And so we're going to make sure that we have all these like contemporary things so people really feel like when they come in, they get what they need. It's a great communication hub. And I said to them, like, guys, I think you're onto something. This is a really exciting idea. And then I said, have you ever been to a library? Because what these guys had done, without really thinking about it, is they had kind of like redesigned the library, right? Reinvented the library. Except for it wasn't even that much of a reinvention. The concept was pretty much the same. It turns out like it had just kind of skipped their mind that there was a thing like this that already exists and that happens to be in neighborhoods all over the place. And I could forgive them for being that way, because in American society today, like actually libraries are hugely popular. Their popularity is surging. A poll came out this week from Pew Research saying The generation that's most likely to use a library, anybody catch this? What's your guess?
Millennials.
Say it again?
Millennials.
You're reading, okay? You got kids, you know too much. All right. Millennials, that's right, she's right. The commissioners were like, old people, old people. No, it's millennials. And they're becoming a more and more vital resource. And they're crowded. Like, the libraries are popular. They're not necessarily only lending books. People are doing all kinds of other things in libraries these days. But they're lively cultural centers. But the thing is, like, if you're at the very, very top of whatever game you're playing, you know, like you're the CEO of a major company, or you're like the top engineer or architect in a major firm, or you're like, how many members of the cabinet right now and you think spend time in their branch libraries? I mean, even people who are leading major philanthropies, I think, are not in tune with what's happening in the places where most of us spend time. So, like, this summer, there was an economist who wrote in Forbes a very controversial and now famous, or if not infamous, op-ed saying, libraries are obsolete. You know, show me the cost-benefit analysis that proves that libraries are really worth the public investment. And he said, I recommend that until someone can prove to me that the library is a worthwhile public investment, we should knock down libraries all over the country and replace them with, guess what? Amazon stores. And I mean, it was pretty fun at the Amazon store. But what a horrible idea that is. And I mean, how grinding can he be? How do we measure the benefits to the library? Like, you know, how do we do that? So it turns out, like, these guys who were designing it hadn't thought about it. I thought, okay, that's got to be my job. You know, if I believe so much in social infrastructure, I need to go out and show what social infrastructure is, and there's no better case of social infrastructure that we have today than the library. So I started spending time in libraries all over New York City. One place in particular, I spent a lot of time on the Lower East Side, and I tried to figure out, like, what happens in our libraries, and what are the things that happen there. And why is it that they probably are worth the investment, or are they worth the investment? And the things I saw when I started spending time in libraries is vital social infrastructure. I saw little kids going in for their early literacy training. You know, the first exposure to books. A lot of families, like, that's where you get books. The books are free. You guys are getting out of control here, Tallahassee. Let's get these phones in order. It's getting very distracting up here. A lot of communities in New York City are multilingual, multi-ethnic, and kids don't necessarily spend time with each other unless you have a place like a library that offers, like, classes where you read stories in English and Mandarin and Spanish all in the same room, and the kids hear each other's stories and hear each other's languages and learn to, like, sing and dance with each other. And that happens very early. And the caretakers, who might not otherwise, like, feel comfortable talking to each other, start to connect with one another. And mothers, you know, it can get a little lonely out there after you have kids for the first time. Is that right? Like, you're home. She's like, no, Tallahassee's a great place to be a mom. But it can be tough. Like, you know, you get trapped at home, you know? And the library can be a place where there's other mothers who are in your situation. I wish more fathers were stepping it up and suffering through that too. So libraries do all this stuff. And then it turns out that libraries, like in New York City, are teaching English as a second language more than any other institution. They're teaching citizenship classes. There are places that are lending out business attire to people who don't have enough money to buy proper business attire for job interviews. They're doing training for ex-convicts, to help them find work. Lots of programs for older people. Cultural things, karaoke classes, reading groups. I've been in all these places. It's extraordinary the number of things that you find in libraries. Like, there's a book that came out about 20-some years ago. Maybe some of you guys know this book called Bowling Alone. You heard of this book, Bowling Alone? It's a very famous social science book. And the real brilliance is, like, I've been thinking a lot about this. I can't think of any two words that you could combine in the English language that would be any sadder than bowling alone. It's probably, like, if you had an algorithm, that would be like probably the number one saddest two-word combination you could come up with. And so it was like a huge bestseller. So like, anyway, it turns out like in Brooklyn, they have a program called Library Lanes, and once a week, older patrons of the library gather together, and they all have like bowling jerseys, and they put on real bowling jerseys, and they go into the rec center, and they hook up a TV and an Xbox, and they compete as a team against the teams from other libraries in Brooklyn. And I spent time with this Library Lanes thing, and I was like, this is so much more fun than a Knicks game. It was unbelievably lively, like sociologists. That was collective effervescence. Like, it was really happening in there. Like, people were, it was so fun. I mean, I happened to be there for an especially exciting match. But it was just amazing. And it's incredible, like, the people who were there bowling on Xbox in the library were the same people demographically who were dying in Chicago during the heat wave. Exactly the people who are most likely to be isolated and at home. And here they were instead, bowling on Xbox. And that gave me some faith. It's hard to have faith right now because it's a pretty rough time out there, you know? I don't know how it feels here in Tallahassee, but like, basically my feeling is that the house is on fire, most of the time. And it's been a hard thing to publish this book, which is about like how you rebuild societies. Because people are like, yeah, Klinenberg, but the house is on fire, you know? And I share that feeling, like things are really bad out there, and what I've been saying to people when I go speak is like, first time in my life, and I don't know if you guys will share this view, but I don't have amazing confidence that 10 years from now, we're going to have a healthy democratic society. Things that I always took for granted as being like just part of what American politics and culture is about, because we have strong institutions here. I don't feel that way so much anymore. I feel very nervous about it. You guys feel nervous? I hope I'm not just paranoid. I mean, actually, I would like to be just paranoid. But you guys are like, oh, no, we got it covered here. I mean, honestly, since it's Florida, if you guys could take care of this, we probably could get it covered. Even if you did it right, you still probably couldn't count the votes, so it wouldn't even matter. So, but anyway, it's just a very weird moment, but I have to say that like when I spend time in libraries, and I spend a lot of time in libraries, I feel a little bit more faith that somehow we're going to make things come together, because libraries are these rare places where you see people who have every reason not to be with one another, finding a way to act civilly in tight space. Now, if you actually spend time in libraries, you know that it's not like a walk in the park. I mean, there's a lot going on in libraries that's difficult, because like, libraries basically have to pick up the slack for every other institution that we neglect. So like if you're homeless and you wake up in the shelter and you need a place to go, they tell you to go to the library. And if you're mentally ill and you need a stable place that's like warm or cool or has a bathroom, your medical team will tell you to go to the library, right? If you got a drug addiction, same thing. If you're very old, if you're very young, if you're poor and you need Wi-Fi access, if you're wealthy and you just don't want to spend another $8 on coffee, you know, we're all in the library, you know, we're all just piled up in there. And the amazing thing that I will say is that despite the fact that we're all piled up in the library and it's a very tight space, in the year that I spent going basically every day, I could count on one hand the number of times when security had to be called in to deal with a situation that had gotten too tense. So yeah, librarians would be like, okay, enough with you and your phone. You know, could you please share the computer? You know, it's his turn for the sports section. You know, like there's a little bit of work that what librarians do is amazing and important work. And the programming of our public institutions matters a lot. You can't just build a place. It really helps to program it. But it is quite extraordinary that you could spend that much time in libraries and see people who are basically getting along well. And periodically these days I compare what I experience when I walk into the library with what happens when I log into my Twitter account. Yeah. I'll be like, just had a great ice cream cone at Haagen-Dazs. Haagen-Dazs, you liberal pig! I mean, it's like we go from 0 to 60 so fast on Twitter, right? I mean, like, it's incredible the way we treat each other when we're like bubbles on a screen. And I don't think that building more libraries or playgrounds or parks in and of itself is going to create a more equal and united society. But I can't think of a better way to start than by building exactly those kinds of places and encouraging people with different backgrounds to spend time in them. I literally can't think of another way to start. And, you know, I took offense over this last couple of years because after the election in 2016, Mark Zuckerberg wrote this open letter to the 2 billion Facebook users on Earth, saying, you know, once upon a time you guys had like churches and town halls and county fairs and, you know, social infrastructure that was physical, but the social infrastructure for the 21st century is going to be Facebook. That's what we're here for. We're here to give you a meaningful community experience. You guys heard that? How many of you guys have been having meaningful community experiences on Facebook recently? And so the reason that was so offensive to me is not just that, like, I don't believe it when someone like Mark Zuckerberg tells you that the way to solve the problem with democracy is to buy his product, right? You should always be skeptical when someone tells you that buying something that they have made is going to solve the world's biggest problems, right? Present company excluded. So, but the thing is that, like, if you've ever spent time on the Facebook campus, you will see that, like, Mark Zuckerberg has spent more money on actual physical social infrastructure than just about anyone on Earth, because it is amazing on the Facebook campus. You guys ever been to the Facebook campus? You ever read about it? Do you know what's going on there? It's like, there's all these places that are set up for serendipitous encounters with your fellow employees. It's like beautiful cafeterias with open space and shared tables, and food is free, by the way. And like bike paths, and bikes are free, and walking paths, and shared office spaces, and like free exercise, and everything possible so that you're going to be happy there. Like, they massage you while you're coding, you know? But why? Because they want you to be more productive. They want your work to be better. And also, if you run a big tech company, you're nervous that your very valuable employees who know how to do AI are going to go leave and work for another company. So you're trying to do everything possible to make them super happy at work. And so how do you do that? Or you're like, oh, we want you to be super happy at work, so you can use Facebook for free as much as you want. In fact, we encourage you to use our product because we know how happy it's going to make you. You think that's what Mark Zuckerberg does? No way. People who work in Silicon Valley do not let their own children use those things. Have you been reading about that? They don't want their own children using it. They're building the most dreamy social infrastructure that money can buy, with the most incredible architects in the world. Go on Facebook, try to see what you can about their offices, you know, or look it up on Google, or go look at some architectural reviews. And you know, the only places that can compete with Facebook for social infrastructure are Google and Apple and Amazon. So when they tell us, like, oh, you guys have Facebook for your social infrastructure, you know, raise your eyebrow. So that's one big idea for infrastructure that we have out there that's coming from Silicon Valley. From Washington, D.C., there's only one idea for infrastructure, and it's the wall. That's the best infrastructure idea that our president has. You know? And I don't care what you think about it in any other way. I'm really not here to make the divisions go worse, but I will tell you that, like, if there's any infrastructure that's antisocial, it's the wall. Because it just hardens our divisions, right? It just separates us. It makes the things that divide us all the more strong, all the more powerful every day. And you know what else? It doesn't work. doesn't work for people, it doesn't work for water. I think we can do better. So the pitch I'm making for you tonight, and I'm going to stop, and I'll go back to shopping, be happy again, is that inevitably, in coming years, we are going to be spending massive amounts of money on infrastructure. Massive. We've got a climate situation we've got to deal with. But we also just have like run-of-the-mill, ordinary infrastructure problems. It's like the systems that we all rely on to be part of modern society do not work. They're just out of date. They don't work anymore. They need to be updated. And it's not just me saying this, like everybody basically believes. In fact, like Trump and Clinton, the only thing they would agree on before the election is that American infrastructure sucks. And infrastructure needs updating around the world. So trillions of dollars will be spent on this. So the pitch I'm making to you, when you leave this room, after you buy a book on Amazon, which gets a one-time pass for this purchase only, is that there's a thing called social infrastructure. It's completely real. It's totally essential. It can make the difference between a high-quality life and a low-quality life, a healthy life and an unhealthy life. It can expand the time you have to live. It can keep you alive during a crisis. It's very real. And when we think about where we want to make investments, and how we want to make our world work better, yeah, we should build bridges and tunnels and update the rail system and finally get one of those high-speed rail networks. But we should also be investing in social infrastructure. And if we don't, we're going to pay a price. Wasn't really planning on ending on like a doom and gloom kind of note, but I felt like that was a very dramatic pause there. So I'm going to stop and we can have a conversation. Thank you very much. We have time for a couple questions. Anybody want to stop me? Yes, sir, in the back.
I mean, the village square itself is a social infrastructure, and we're blessed to have this be really the beginning of it. I'm just kind of tossing in my head buildings which are there, but without this effort of a community trying to have collaborative discussion, to me, that's more the missing element than the buildings. But I hear you loud and clear, those buildings are there and ought to be open on Sunday and having these kinds of discussions.
You have to make them accessible, right? You have to make them welcoming. And what you're talking about is like what I call the programming. So like if you've got people who run nonprofits are vital to the social infrastructure. Now, they're especially powerful when they have like a place, a physical place that everyone knows they can go to. Because it can be great to have a place that you can borrow and use occasionally. They can work really well. If you can get the word to everybody so everyone knows where it is and has a way to get there and is welcome there. And I can, people often ask me like, what about like private places? Like, isn't there a role in the social infrastructure for for-profit operations like the pub in England, or the diner, like these classic third spaces? And I think there is also a space for that. Like I grew up in Chicago. Very big African-American community in Chicago, and the barber shop and the hair salon, like those are essential parts of the social infrastructure in Chicago's black neighborhoods. And like the pub in England is totally essential. And people always like, oh yeah, the cafe, the diner. Well, there's a very popular cafe in America right now. It's called Starbucks. And Starbucks is a very interesting phenomenon because, like, first of all, when a Starbucks goes up, it doesn't have to put a no loitering sign on the window for people to know, like, some of us are welcome there and some of us are not welcome there. Because it signals just in its very existence, like, who it wants in and who it doesn't want in. And they're very good about making sure you know that. And it's not just Starbucks, like McDonald's, Dunkin' Donuts, they all have those signs in the window which they can selectively enforce, telling you that you're not allowed to loiter and that you can stay for 30 minutes after you make your purchase. Now let's be really honest about this, okay? I'm a white guy, middle-aged, professional, and if I walk in with my computer, I could sit down at a McDonald's, maybe I have to order something, maybe not. I could probably sit there for 8-12 hours before anyone said anything to me, and if they said anything to me, they would be very solicitous, right? And if you're teaching sociology, have your students go do this experiment someday. But not everybody gets that treatment. In Queens, a couple years ago, there was this group of elderly Koreans, and they used to go to McDonald's every morning for breakfast, and one day the manager was just like, enough of this. They had ordered, but they had overstayed their welcome as far as he was concerned, and so he kicked them out. And he kept doing it until the New York Times jumped in, and they started protesting. And everyone was asking, like, how on earth could you kick out this community of poor Koreans? What a horrible thing to do. And then, do you remember what happened this summer in Philadelphia? Anybody remember the story in Philadelphia? 2 African-American guys go into Starbucks, they're meeting a friend. Let me ask you guys, has anyone here ever had a friend show up late to a meeting? It happens, right? And how many of you got arrested when that happened? The guy showed up late for the meeting. So to be polite, these gentlemen did not order, they waited for their friend to come in. What Starbucks could have done at that moment is said like, oh, hello sirs, we see that you're sitting at this table here. This is really for Starbucks customers, so we'd like to invite you to come and purchase a coffee beverage, or maybe a nice tea, and you can stay for a long time and have your meeting. That would have been very nice of them. Or they could have said, like more rudely, they could have said, listen, sirs, this is really a place for Starbucks customers, and you've been here for a while and you haven't ordered anything, so I'm going to have to ask you to leave if you're not planning on getting something. Slightly more aggressive. Starbucks didn't do any of those things. Do you remember what Starbucks did? They called the police and had them arrested for trespassing. Now, if that's happening in the place that we've all celebrated as like the new third space, like go to the coffee shop and communities happen there, it tells us that there are limits to what the market is going to give us as a third place. At a minimum, you got to be able to spend money, but also like some people are being very clearly told, if not with words, with deeds, that they're not welcome there. And clearly that was an issue on the Lower East Side where I spent time. A lot of the stores there don't even take cash anymore. You can only pay for your goods if you have a credit card, and obviously that's a class thing, right? So there really is a special role for public institutions, and I think accessible nonprofit institutions, to play in creating more welcoming and accessible spaces. And I think you're totally right. Having the building is not enough. It's also about the ethos and the programming and doing the work to make sure that everyone knows that they're one. Yes?
I was going to ask about kind of the political implications of libraries and this kind of anti-intellectual sentiment that has swept the nation. And what is, I think it's already happened, that there's like a backlash against funding libraries because they're conflated with education, which is conflated with liberalism, which is conflated with people voting a certain way and high taxes. And so how do you unpack those things so that we can preserve libraries in this political environment, which is highly anti-intellectual?
Yeah, so I will say one thing, that I've actually spent time in a lot of red states where it's true, there's an anti-tax sentiment, and there may be some animosity towards people like me who are university professors. But, a lot of communities in red states that love their libraries too. You can find some very crowded libraries in Alabama and Mississippi and Louisiana, and your neighbor is not too far from here also. Like, check out their library sometimes, because people actually like using them. And I think the associations people have with places like libraries, and also with playgrounds and athletic facilities, they're much more positive than people understand. And in fact, I've been learning more and more about towns, municipalities that are opting into voter referenda to increase their taxes, not massively, but a little bit, to improve the quality of their local library system. And I actually think that some of these gapping places are popular enough that they could drive that kind of support. So I'm not glib about the whole situation. I think, the story that we've told ourselves about how to make this country better, how to make a better world over the last few decades is basically a story where it's like, each of us is going to be better off if we just get the government off our back and we make sure we pay as little tax as possible, right? And keep as much of our own damn money, and we don't spend on other government things because that's just going to get wasted. And so we want to, what's that idea? Like we want to make government so small that you can drown it in a bathtub. Starve it that way. And that's kind of been how we've been governed. Not all the time, but you know, a lot of states have been governed that way, and a lot of the federal government's been governed that way. By the way, we just passed the biggest tax cut for the wealthiest people in history at a time when they were already massively and grotesquely wealthy, and inequality was at historic levels. So I'm not glib, but my sense is that a growing number of people have had enough of that. And in fact, like when you looked at the polling, even in this last election, people who are voting for kind of Republican candidates now, they weren't voting because of the tax cuts. Those weren't very popular. I think people know that like we actually have to invest in each other, and that the quality of our collective life really does matter. And I'll say this one thing I said to the commissioners this morning. We know that we're doing something wrong when the winners in our system, the people who are the most successful, are using their extraordinary wealth to buy things like, you know, massive compounds in New Zealand where they can go when everything falls apart here. But basically, like, the people who have rigged up a system so that they can have as much possible for themselves are finding that when the collective thing sinks, they need an escape strategy. You know, so you need a private jet, you need to have your own pilots, you need to have your own infrastructure, you need to have your own places where you can escape because society is going to fall apart. That doesn't really sound like winning to me. That doesn't seem like winning to me. So I think we're ready for a different vision and a new way of organizing things. And if I had a sharper, more articulate way to say it, if I could really name it, I would be, you know, talking to way more people. So I pass it back to you guys. And oh my God, you guys are so lucky you live in a state where like your vote matters. You know, like what you guys do, it actually makes a difference in the world. Like you guys have so much power. It doesn't even matter what I want. You know? I have like a little bit of awe for you. You're like my fate is in your hands. And Broward County too. Okay, let's do one last one, and then we'll do the whole Amazon everyone buy my book at the same time thing. Okay, yes.
So your colleagues who suggested sort of a reimagining of the library. My question is, were they onto anything you think, or is it stuff you've already done? Let me elaborate a little more. I spend a lot of time in libraries because I study a lot, and I have kids, and I'm a millennial. So I'm thinking, like, when it comes to mind, like, what can we do to make libraries a little better? I'm thinking most libraries don't have food, like Starbucks does, and most libraries don't necessarily have outdoor playgrounds or, like, space where you can get a little bit of exercise, like, combined with the social stuff. So I'm wondering if those are things you found when you visited all different libraries, or just other stuff that you think we could reimagine.
Very much, and there are libraries all over the country that are doing precisely those things. When you invest in libraries, you have a moment to think about what it is a contemporary library and what do we want from it. You know, I was just at University of Texas at Austin, and Austin just built this incredible new library, and there's an amazing cafe. It's actually connected to a really nice restaurant, and the proceeds from the restaurant help to support the library. And there's like a party space that is publicly inaccessible, and like it looks like when you're on the upper level on the deck, you're right by the river. It feels like you're in one of these Tony hotels in Austin. And you can also, after it closes, you can rent it out for parties at night. Now, there are libraries all like, and there's just an article that was circulating around about Reykjavik has this incredible new library. There's new libraries in Finland. You know, societies around the world are investing in awesome libraries, and you can go online and just Google, you know, awesome new libraries, and you will be amazed at all the possibilities. But we don't think about that because we're not putting money into our libraries for the most part. You know, we fund libraries as an afterthought because they're luxuries, because they don't cash out on the cost-benefit analysis, because life is better if you just have Amazon, right? So until we start to collectively recognize the power of the library to do all these things, we won't even take the best examples that are out there for us, and low-hanging fruit, and make our own communities better. And so the book I wrote actually has a lot of stories about communities that are doing the right thing. Places around the world that have tried to build social infrastructure that works better for them. And it's my argument here that a lot of the solutions that we need to deal with our most pressing problems are right in front of us. We don't need a new app. We don't need the brilliance of the markets. We just need the political will to pay attention and to make things better. So, okay guys, thank you very much. It's been a lot of fun.